come up on our
digital
page.
cards with links, yeah. That's all really good. It's important work.
Hey, Lorraine.
It's definitely very interesting.
Okay, so now where would it be?
I see myself doing it until I ended up kind of just filling the gap.
Yeah.
So I did my graduated from business a couple years ago at Lakehead University here, and I going to Shambhala Music Festival. I saw what they provided there as a service, and saw that in town
There we go. Okay, live now.
Going out to bars, some places don't even have water available, some what's available, they don't have like anything.
So I think we're short some chairs.
Yeah, and like there's many places like flyers, so like somebody needs to go and get something, like sometimes you can't even go to like a Shopper's because it's closed, or like
we'll just stream
take a cab to one.
Right.
So yeah.
So that people can find out. No, just keep it on. Just keep it on.
It's so interesting.
So just so everybody knows, we are streaming live right now. So no off-color jokes. No.
Be on your best behavior.
Just we're gonna start in a few minutes.
That's a really intimidating microphone.
Yeah, it's like a heck of a microphone.
Quality,
Okay,
Yeah.
so I wanted to record this too. So
Where's the camera?
it's there. It's ready to go. Oh, yeah. Somebody's. Hey, Martin.
Just seems that we're a little tight here.
Yeah, well, this is sort of the plan. If we get too tight, then I guess we can just add a table, right?
Yeah.
At the end.
What if we move these two side tables just back a little bit and out a little bit? Just
Yeah, we could. Let's do it. Okay, everybody stand up. We're gonna move.
and what if
But that table over there, just hang on till we get some direction, because our streaming situations.
but if you put it on a little bit of an angle, then everybody's looking down the table. Nobody's, you know what I mean?
Okay. So just hang on to the. Don't do anything
Like a funnel?
until Dale is hanging on to the computer. It's the computer that we're.
I'll hold this.
Yeah.
You grab
Okay.
that.
You guys, yeah. And then, okay, these guys, you guys can.
That'll give everybody a bit more room. But just angle it. Bring this end in a little bit closer. Right? So, but let's. Hey, Shirley,
Beyond what I'm already doing.
push that end of the table out that way a little bit. Just one end, that end. Yeah, just like that. I think that'll be easier for people to
How's that?
see, sure.
Oh, sorry. Okay. So, okay. Okay, that's cool. Okay, so, I was hoping that somebody, maybe like Adrian or Skylar, we could sort of take turns. We're just gonna, it's just to record this with this camera. Yeah. You can, yeah. Like you wouldn't be in isolation if you had reconfigured. But, anyways, not to single anybody out. Well, we don't want to be, Ron, we don't want to be too far because we want everybody to be able to pick up on the microphone and stuff.
But they're not. It's just, there's a little more space.
Yeah, but now everyone's farther.
It's nice to finally meet you. Yeah.
Seeing your work.
Me too.
So, it should be what happens? And so you can, and just double check that the audio is good. It should be. Okay. Is that okay?
that thing on?
Oh, no. Hang on. Oh, yeah, no, I turned it on.
Might be on mute.
Oh my god.
Is it working? Whoops.
It's good. Is it muted?
Yeah, I'm just gonna.
Just grab a seat anywhere, Nathan. There's a comfy chair up here.
Oh yeah. It says mute.
On in.
Oh,
take the
I
mute
don't-
off.
I don't know why it went on to mute. Okay.
Well, there's one in there.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
need another
Fun breaking the action.
comfy chair. Just,
There's chairs all there, comfy.
you could have that.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know where I should put this. I just put it on the table? Okay. There. That should be it. Okay.
We got 2 viewers.
We got 2 viewers? Right on. Okay. Oh, well, hopefully yeah, I'm one of them.
We were
Us
watching
two.
ourselves.
Okay. And, okay, so
Where's this streaming?
it's streaming to the world
Through YouTube? YouTube?
on YouTube. Yeah. on our Vox Popular channel.
Okay.
And, but also we have a Skype. Okay. I'm not sure if she's, oh yeah. I'm just gonna try hammering her. Okay. Oh, hey, Nadine.
Hi.
Hey. Oh, it's because we're streaming. That's all. We can hear the.
The delay.
Oh yeah. So we're. So,
Oh, there's
That's
a
great.
really funny echo here because there's the stream going and Skype.
okay.
Where do we call
Okay.
this?
Yeah.
Yeah, forever.
There we go. There's a really funny
Okay. So we'll put you on mute for now. Okay. Okay. And we'll chat until it's your turn to talk.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. We'll put you on mute for now.
Or mute the other one,
Yeah.
the live one.
What's this?
Mute the live one right now.
I.
YouTube one.
Oh, can I do?
Yeah.
Yeah, but we could hear them listening to us on the delay and all. Anyways, craziness. Okay. Okay, I think we're ready to start. Okay, well, I'm just going to give a general welcome to everyone. And my name's Kelly Saxberg, and I'm just totally thrilled with the turnout. And before the mentors here at the front here are going to give a little 5-minute description of who we are and the kind of work we do. And then all of you are going to introduce yourselves, and then we'll get into the whole discussion of storytelling and digital media. And so I guess we'll just start with how about Ron and go this way.
Well, I'm Ron Harpel, and I happen to be the chair of the Vox Popular Media Arts Festival. And I'm also a filmmaker, and I'd really like to thank the people in Sioux Lookout who were looking in on us, and anyone else for joining us, and thank all of you for coming out. I don't have much else to say at this point. I think I have more to say later on. So that's who I am. Oh, and I'm very pleased to welcome Greg Scott from Chicago to be our special guest here at this
Totally unnecessary, but thank you for the applause and the introduction. I'm Greg Scott. I'm from Chicago. I have been at DePaul University working as my home department is sociology. I teach art, cinema, and visual critical studies at DePaul. I've been a filmmaker for a long time, most of my adult life, and I do some visual arts as well and performance art pieces. And I'm here to work with you all and have some amazing days of creating new things that didn't exist before. So I'm excited.
Hey everyone, I'm Marcus Degenbar. I am a graduate from Lakehead University here in the Honors Bachelor of Commerce program. I am also the festival intern for Vox Popular. And I co-founded a nonprofit harm reduction group in town called BaySafe. So I guess that's how my experience with harm reduction kind of ties into this. So I've made a number of connections in the city. So if anybody's looking to maybe make some connections to help improve or reach out to people for the film, then I might be able to help with that.
My name is Riaz Mahmood, and I'm a multidisciplinary artist. I'm also technical coordinator at Vox Popular. I use video, photography, performance arts, and code-based code to make art. I do a lot of collaboration too with other people, and I believe in open source softwares and open source technology. So looking forward to seeing what kind of projects you guys are working on. Yeah.
And well, maybe I'll just say a few more words about myself. I'm a local filmmaker. I'm one of the founders with Ron of the, it was formerly the Bay Street Film Festival, now it's Vox Popular Media Arts Festival. And one of the reasons that we changed the name was, well, we changed the venue, we're no longer on Bay Street, but also we are moving more towards multimedia and digital media and opening ourselves up to all kinds of different ways of putting our messages on screens. And you know, I started out in very traditionally with the National Film Board of Canada, working on 16mm film. That was the first way I edited a film, with pieces of film, literally. And but then fast forward, only a month ago, we were in this very hall, a lot of us here, working on a film project that we were shooting on film again. So, but still, all the whole post-production and the animation and everything else is all digital. And then I've been lucky to be able to work and learn some new things. I got to take the Arduino course with Riaz, and we did a 360 course. And so anyways, be able to share a little bit later about kind of, anyway, everything is always changing and there's always something new to learn, and it's really an exciting time. And I'm glad that you're all here.
Yeah, we'll be talking about animation and also projection mapping, and we will show one of the projects that Kelly did. So, projection mapping.
Okay, so did you want to say a bit more? Or, well, we'll talk about knowledge mobilization after. Okay, so before you introduce yourselves, after we talk a little bit about story and that from our perspective, and you're welcome always input from all of you, after we have this whole nice discussion, then we're going to talk a little bit about pitching ideas. And so then we're going to have like a quick break, and everybody's going to have a little fun exercise over coffee of pitching. And I'll explain a little bit more. And then you're going to like share your ideas, and then we'll all try to give some feedback. And then after that, we're going to watch, Greg is going to introduce his film, and then we'll watch that, and then we can have like a whole Q&A and discussion. It's good to have a concrete piece of work to discuss. And so anyway, so that's the agenda for tonight. So why don't we start? With you, Dalibor.
Okay. My name is Dalibor Messina. I teach sociology at Lakehead University. I'm not a filmmaker, and my interest in being here is more, shall we say, theoretical and conceptual. So I'm here to listen and learn, and hopefully understand the process of filmmaking a little bit better.
My name is Skylar Duggan. I'm a musician and an audio engineer. Done some work with Ron and Kelly like a month ago on Lakehead at War, and yeah, that's me.
I'm Alyssa Kuzik. I like art, and I work for Kelly.
Got my whole team here.
I'm Sandy Monius, and I've been in the Docks North for a few times, and I've enjoyed it, and I'm back.
Oh, I'm Martin, local artist, and occasional filmmaker. Full name Martin King.
My name's Robin Saxberg. I'm an interior designer and construction project manager for residential renovation projects and additions, generally speaking. And I did set design for Lakehead at War, and I'm sort of looking more into doing more film-related work. But I am not a filmmaker, also.
Yet.
Yeah. After today, though.
Hi, my name is Keegan Richard. I'm a freelance filmmaker, graphic designer, and photographer, so multimedia artist. I've been volunteering with Bay Street, but now known as Vox Popular, for a few years now, and as well as Flash Frame. And also a couple of years ago, I just graduated from the interactive media program. So I did a project, a final project I did that actually aired at Vox Popular a few days after the project was complete.
Excellent. Okay, here you go to.
I guess I'll go in front of the camera.
Yeah.
Dale Carmichael. I helped out for the Bay Street Film Festival for a couple of years volunteering. I'm now helping out for Vox Popular, and I helped out on the Lakehead at War shoot. I was an extra. I helped build some sets, and just kind of, I was the director's assistant, I guess you can call me.
Okay. Oh yeah, here, get Adrian, and then we'll go. Adrian, you have to. Yeah, film yourself.
Hey, I'm Adrian. I'm a musician and a sound engineer. That's sort of what I do. I'm all about sound.
Okay.
And operating this camera.
So you're a filmmaker?
Yeah.
Just over on that end.
No, I did Dogs North before, and I've done some movies and stuff.
Yeah, and you
Film
were
is cut.
Well, oh, and another one. Yeah, okay, there, that's good.
Do you want me to go?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm Wendy St. Laurent Coots, and health is my background. I'm interested in public and population health, and I'm hoping to learn a bit about art in terms of storytelling, video making, for my PhD research, because I'm hoping to use the storytelling aspect for my research.
Hi, I'm Ruth Squires, and I'm a writer. I can write anything, and I'm a journalist. I have a journalism degree. I've published, and I have a lot of different projects that are already done, but my latest project is a screenplay, and I'm here to with the hope of getting the screenplay produced. So that's why I'm here. I'm here to meet all of you and see what you can do. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Shirley Gaudinen, and it all started with Under the Red Star. But I've helped Kelly out and worked for her and with her on a lot of different things.
Hi, I'm Nathan Hatton. I'm a seasonally employed contract lecturer at Lakehead University. I've written a lot on the history of combat sports in North America. I've done 2 books on the subject of wrestling in Canada, and I'm looking to take some of what I've done in writing and transfer that to new mediums. So I'm looking for hard skills and how to do that in terms of video and audio.
Okay, yeah, so.
Okay, hi, my name is April Head. I am a First Nations Quaff from Lake Nipigon. I'm here to learn more about multimedia arts and practices. I'm also interested in oral traditions, so I'm learning about maybe like right now it's kind of like the way we tell stories is usually through mouth, but I think that's important now with the new coming ways that we learn different ways of doing things. So it's part of a thesis I did last year, because we have a collection at the university of oral history or oral stories. So, but it's more kind of like I learned the difference between traditional stories and storytelling, because they're more kind of life stories and stuff like that, this collection. But there's a lot of important information in there because they're like 20, 30-year-old interviews. So part of the project I'm still kind of looking at is digitizing. So I'm here kind of like just learning more about, like I said, what everybody has here to teach me. I'm just, right now I'm just finishing my master's in social justice, and there's always new ways of learning things to kind of finish off what work needs to be done, so to tell another story. Thanks.
My name is Arlene Kirkman King. I've been involved with the arts and heritage community for 30 years in the region, but I like to think of myself as a producer, promoter, presenter, performer, and pictoscribe of modern times. So pictoscribe is a bit of a storyteller with incorporating my visual arts. So I'm looking forward to incorporating the pictoscribe part of my life within the filmmaking to be a storyteller in digital media. So thanks a lot for having me here.
Hi, my name is Muzaffar Hassan. My background is engineering and technology. I'm visiting Thunder Bay, and thank you for Kelly and Ron and Riaz for inviting me to this such an exciting event. My current interest is a transformation of education using technology, specifically personalized education, which I think is going to be needed in the future as the world is changing at a very exponential pace. And that's what I'm probably going to be focusing on this, and I'm here to learn about how to use that concept into that movie making and media.
I'm Rafat Muzaffar, and I'm into gaming and game making, and I joined this course with my father to learn about animation and filmmaking. And yeah.
Okay, now, okay, so, okay, here, I'm gonna, okay, so Sue Lookout, can you introduce yourself? I'm gonna. Okay, so Sue Lookout, can you introduce yourself? I'm gonna.
Can you hear me? Oh, wait.
Yeah, we've got you. We can
There
hear
we
you.
go.
Yeah.
Hey. Oh, good. Okay. Hi, my name is Lane. I work for the Near North Mobile Media Lab, and I run the digital creator space here in Silicout. So we're an art and technology, digital media exploration space for youth in the community. I'm hoping to learn some new skills to better support the youth in my program. They're really into filmmaking and storytelling. And I'm a graphic designer and an illustrator by trade, so I'm trying to kind of learn this faster than they can ask me questions. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to this. I'll hand it over to my partner here. Hi, I'm Jack Morales, and I'm a theater performer, so I do a bit of acting on stage, and I'm hoping to grasp as much knowledge about filmmaking as possible. That's why I'm here. I think that's it for us.
Okay. Okay, do you want to move the microphone?
Yeah.
into a situation and I'm interested in making a film about the people who are in that situation, I'm not gonna like, there's no way that I could possibly ever film every single thing they do 24 hours a day, you know, every minute of every day. It just can't happen. So to be honest, I just try to put it out there and say, you know, this is your life, but ultimately it's going to be my story about your life. And it's your life that's furnishing the material for this story. And no one's ever said, oh, that's a terrible thing. I think everybody gets that. It's just that we don't often make it explicit. When you don't make it explicit, you run the risk of people thinking that you're going to make a promotional video about them, like how great they are and how amazing everything they do really is. And I mean, we're just not that way as humans, right? We're all flawed and interesting in various ways. So I don't know. I think that for me, story is the motivation. It could be the emotional, the cognitive, the psychological, the mystical, the spiritual, the cosmic set of motivations that go into a series of events unfolding in people's lives. And that's distinguished from plot, which again is this sort of, you know, this, then that, and then this. And I think that, you know, the only other thing I'll say, and I'll just close this brief comment with this, and that's that, like, once you kind of figure out what this story is, or what you think the story might be, it's important to be open to the probability, not possibility, that it's going to change. Because human life is dynamic, and if you're making a film or an animation even, or doing something with humans, chances are those characters, even if you've invented those characters, as is the case with video gaming and animation, should have room to breathe and grow and expand and live. And any writer worth his or her or their salt will tell you that those characters will take on their own life. And it's important to stand back from those and let them have their own life, and then figure out how you're going to shape that life into a story that you want to tell the world. And I think that it's also important to consider the medium. I rarely start with the medium. I start with a story and the concept, and then try to figure out, okay, what medium is really demanded by this particular story or this particular concept. I think we've all seen more bad movies than good movies. And speaking of just documentaries, like people who are just talking endlessly into the camera, nothing else is happening. That's not a particularly good use of film as a medium, in my opinion. Right? Film lends itself to certain situations and certain things, and maybe not so well to others. So many films that we might see where it's only talking heads might be better served conceptually and story-wise with something else, like still photography or text or animation or a video game. You know, I fairly recently worked on a project about bipolar disorder. And, you know, the team, you know, it was a collaborative approach, and we were talking about all these different ways to do a couple of very difficult things. One is to tell the story of bipolar disorder, and the other is to actually provide, in that same mechanism, a therapeutic opportunity for people who actually experience bipolar disorder. And the media, and if film wouldn't cut it, photography wouldn't cut it, we couldn't figure out a way to do it, you know, textually. We ended up landing on a video game. So we used animation and made a video game about bipolar disorder, which both educates people who are completely ignorant of the disorder and also sensitizes people who are experiencing it to different ways that they can explain it, talk about it, verbalize it, and maybe address it in their lives. So the story, you know, could be just about anything, and it doesn't necessarily have to be about people, but ultimately every story is consumed by people, right? We're not, I mean, we can make a story about plants. I don't know if you've seen Insecurity. That's like a really great film that Ron made. And, you know, and inanimate objects can be a perfectly wonderful subject for a story, but you're not going to show your film to inanimate objects, or your video game is not going to be played by plants. It's going to be played by humans. The animation won't be seen by anything other than humans. Maybe some pets along the way, but they won't comprehend it probably. Or if they do, we can't understand that comprehension. So yeah, I mean, I think that that's the final element, which is that, you know, remember that you're an audience all the time to stories. And so you have this kind of conditioned, it's not innate, it's a a result of lifelong conditioning. It's an understanding of what makes a story work and what makes a story stink. And I think that that's important to keep in mind when you're trying to tell your own story through whatever medium you've chosen. That's it. Those are my thoughts on story.
Okay. Well, Ron, why don't you talk a little bit about knowledge mobilization and how you, as a academic, have fallen into, not just because I made you or...
Okay, so just so people understand, knowledge mobilization is just a term used by funding agencies for academics to get academics to do more than just publish an article or a book, but to reach out somehow to a much broader audience. And it can involve, all forms of media. So my experience has been with documentary film. And Greg mentioned one which is called Insecurity, and I'm a historian. So it's the history of barbed wire from its invention in the 1860s up until its use in modern usages. And it's a series of vignettes, because I didn't want to tell sort of a linear story and it would be impossible to tell that sort of linear story and touch on all of the elements. So it touches on, it's a series of vignettes dealing with uses of this simple agricultural innovation. I made another film about bananas, and it's essentially the same sort of thing. And the reason that I made a film about bananas and about barbed wire, or one of the reasons, was that everybody on the planet knows what a banana is. Unless if you're under 5 years old, you might not be able to recognize one necessarily, or under 3. And the same with barbed wire. There isn't one place on this planet that hasn't been exposed to barbed wire. I'm sure that even in Antarctica, when they build up their little scientific stations, they bring barbed wire to protect it from, I don't know what, the penguins or something. So everybody knows what it is, but people don't see beyond the wire. And, there was a simple, these were simple films that drew people's attention to the real story behind the banana. The question was, where do bananas come from? So it tells the story of where bananas come from, but it involves politics and economics and world wars and all sorts of different things. With the barbed wire, it's the same thing. Everybody sees it, but think about what's behind it and what it means and what it represents. And then I've made a series of other films, more specifically related maybe in some ways to my research, but it's always been, they're all educational films. So they're not training films, but they raise issues that I think are important for people to consider in their lives and when thinking about different topics. So I've worked on a variety of different films, looking at a variety of different things, the forest industry and single industry towns. I've looked at international development, and all of my work focuses on my desire to create films that can be used in the classroom, but that can spark debate and spark people's interest in looking beyond the evident and beyond the apparent, and looking much deeper into subjects. So when I think of storytelling, and my stories are not, I don't tell the same story over and over again. Essentially, they have similar elements, and I don't tell the stories in the same way because not every subject lends itself to the same style of film. So I have another film called Hard Time, and it is a talking head film, basically. It's a man who spent 29 years in solitary confinement for a crime he didn't commit. But we use archival footage, we use photographs, but mainly it's this man speaking about it. And the thing that I liked about that film was that there's no narration. So I didn't rely on a narrator. In other films, I've relied on a narrator. And so there are just different formats and different ways of approaching subjects that sort of I just feel that the subject lends itself to a different style of film. So in a sense, I've tried a number of different styles, and they seem to be reasonably well received and effective in conveying my message. So if I had to say something about storytelling, it would be that you kind of have to let the subject, as Greg pointed out, the subject dictates how the story will ultimately unfold, and you can't predict it. You can't begin by thinking that you're going to necessarily rely exclusively on narration, and then you have to think of all of the other elements that come into it, music and archival footage and the sound that you use, the images that you use of the individuals, and you can't tell all of their story, but you have to sort of capture them in ways that are interesting to people, and then you have to think about your audience. And my audience is always the same audience. Essentially, I make my films for everyone, but in particular, I'm interested in people between the ages of about 15 years old and 25 years old, because I think maybe 25 is a little too late, but I think you can have an impact on people's lives and understanding of the world around them up to a certain point. But at some point, people have made up their minds, and it's very difficult to change their minds. So I like to make films that can be used with youth and young people, and maybe get them to think differently about things. And I've said enough, so that's my pitch on storytelling.
Okay, how about Marcus? You do all kinds of different ways.
Yeah, well, I'd say definitely with like storytelling. So I guess a little bit more background as to what I do. So I DJ, I run a harm reduction service. I work here as well. So through this, I've definitely been exposed to a lot of film and just like a lot of new things that I haven't experienced otherwise. But I guess for like storytelling, like a big thing for me is my music and being able to express different feelings and like different emotions in ways that words can't really do itself. There's just something special about music, and like when you feel something and you get like chills or like shiver down your spine, and like sometimes it's like the words in music, it's the sounds together in harmony that are going to be able to provide that. And I think like that's a big thing as well with film that I really enjoy, is when you have like the music and the sound really enhances the experience and like the story. Like you can do a lot with it. And the way I see it when I create a mixtape is it has a starting and an end point. It has a lot of stuff that happens in between, but I like to kind of choose a little bit where it's going to start and where it's going to end. And the whole middle part, I guess, as it's kind of been said already, like it evolves. You can't necessarily like force it, because inevitably there's going to be something that maybe you had something planned and something just happens and like it sounds great, and like, you know, that experience came spontaneously, just like through trial and error. And I think for me, like that's definitely where I really do enjoy the storytelling aspect. And then through my other areas, so being harm reduction, I guess telling people a story that, you know, you should really value yourself, you should value those around you, and really value like pursuit of further knowledge and education, whatever it be about. I'd say probably the biggest thing that we try to share and teach through BaySafe is that it's really the small changes that make a big difference overall in your health and maybe your perceptions. So it's maybe the little things that you notice. So you know, maybe a totally different example, but you know, tying your shoes. If somebody wasn't maybe telling you to tie your shoes and you didn't think of that as like a potential hazard, you might not consider it until you fall and injure yourself. So the way I see harm reduction is just telling people how they can be safer, whether it just be being aware of like how you're taking care of yourself, what kind of situations you're putting yourself in. And I think those are definitely some of the big things, especially relating to substance use, is who are you with, where are you, and what is your experience with it, and like what is your intention, and just kind of putting that all together. And I guess through that, it's like an educational story, I guess.
Mr. Riaz.
So for me, it's because I work across different mediums. So for me, it's the story that I want to tell, and then I think about the medium, which would be the best medium to tell this story with. One example that comes to my mind is when I was doing my MFA in Windsor. My first year was all, I was working on a project. It was Eastern Warrior. It was a small figurine and from Afghanistan, and I was just working on stereotype, those kind of ideas, and I was trying to make stories about him, but through photographs, and it didn't work. I was very adamant. I said, no, it will work, but it didn't work. So in second year, I thought about it more, and I said, well, it's not working. So because I'm telling stories that are very complex and very layered, and it's very hard to do that in just a single photograph. So I made videos about them, 4 videos, and I explored all those things that I wanted to tell, and I think it was the right medium. The other example is I was working with Thunder Bay Art Gallery. They had hired me to engage youth with their collection, their art collection. So we were coming up with different ideas about how to engage them, what kind of stories we can tell to engage them. And different ideas, one idea was that we'll make some kind of web series about like different artwork and different artists so they can get engaged. But finally we decided on a video game. Like, why don't we make a video game that the kids can play, and while they're playing they can learn something? And I think that was the best medium for that kind of subject. For my own personal work, I do a lot of the things that I work with or I'm interested in is the idea of home, the idea of belonging, and the idea of truth. What is truth? Or there is no one single truth. Those kind of stuff I'm interested in. And especially I'm really interested for the past 3 or 4 years with the use of technology and how to use technology or learn new things about technology and how to use it creatively in my own work or the people that I collaborate with, how to exploit those technologies to tell good stories. So I think that's, yeah.
Well, I'll give an example of, so that we can maybe segue into the whole kind of idea of how you convince other people that the story that you want to tell using, let's say, some kind of digital medium is first of all going to be of interest for other people, but if you wanted to make a film or make a video or do something, unless you have, a partner who has a really good full-time job, you can't really do it without getting some kind of funding for it. So I've started out at the beginning making films with no money and collaborating with friends and borrowing equipment and joining video co-ops. And then I went the other route where I took the long approach and I wanted to make, what I first thought was a real film with a whole crew and, have everyone gets paid on it. And so that was my first, I practiced first making my own films, just on what I was interested in. And then I found like a really good story. I thought, okay, this is something maybe I can, convince a broadcaster, convince the National Film Board of Canada, or convince Arts Council to give me some funding to make that film. And so that was the number one learning curve, because even though a lot of you now have the benefit of free software that's available on the internet, that's open code, open source. You can use almost everybody has access to a cell phone, and so you have like tools, and you could probably watch anything that you want to do. You can watch a YouTube video now. People are really generous at sharing how to do anything. But if you want to go the next step and do something that is a well-researched, long-term project that's a little bit bigger in scope, that you want to be able to collaborate with other artists who have skills and training that they've invested in, then you have to go the next step and find ways of financing that project. And Ruth is nodding because that's exactly the step that she's at. So one thing that I learned early on was perfecting the kind of the pitch, the story of the kind of film that I wanted to make, why I should be making it, why it's never been made before, and why people would want to see it. And you need to be able to express yourself and express those ideas in a very short amount of time. And unless you want to like invest a lot of money in going around to like film festivals and places where you can have access to like broadcasters and all that kind of stuff. But that's very difficult when you come from Thunder Bay. So the next step is to practice with the people here, practice with your friends and your potential collaborators, and then start writing and write applications. But it all starts with the kernel of an idea, and sometimes just being able to practice expressing what is this project that you have, what is this story, and then also you have to make it interesting. It's like you're a stand-up comedian almost, right? Like you've got to, because people's eyes will just glaze over. Like I've been to all these like film festivals or conferences or whatever, and what you want to do is like tell people, yeah, so what are you working on? What's your film? And then you start saying, yeah, well, I'm making a film about little old ladies who built airplanes in Second World War, and they're just sort of like, they might be interested, or you might find somebody who says, oh yeah, that's really great. My grandmother in the Second World War, she worked in a factory and whatever. But if you want to be able to convince people to go that next step, and you don't want to do things like GoFundMe or, talk to your rich brother or, mortgage your house or do those things, you have to find your story, hone it, practice telling it to people yourself in person until you, if you want to engage people to support you in this endeavor. Then, just in the process of doing that, it really helps you when you get to the writing. And one of the first things in like every grant application, you always have to put a summary, like a 2-line. What is this film about? What is this project about? What is this game going to be about? And what is it that it's going to do that will, create an audience? Like, why would anybody want to like watch this film? And so anyway, I just want everybody to sort of think about that. And if anybody has any questions for any of us on any other examples, otherwise we could like take a little break. And what I was going to suggest was we were going to have. You can say a few more words, but just so that people can be thinking of this. But when we have our break, I want you to go up to 1 or 2 people that you don't know, that you've never met before, and tell them an idea of a short project that you could do.
And it could be anything. Doesn't need to be a film.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be a film. It could be a web page, or it could be a picture, or like anything that you would want to share. You know, where it doesn't have to be a documentary. It doesn't have to be about harm reduction. It could be about your grandmother. It could be, you know, someone you admire. It could be anything. It could be like, you know, the history of wrestling. You know, one particular guy and the great fight. You know, like it could be anything. So we can yak on, you guys can be thinking, and then what we're going to do for the exercise is we'll break for coffee and that, but we'll just have you have 2 minutes to talk to somebody and tell them their idea. They'll tell you your idea, then go and find somebody else. And you got to just to get your ideas out there flowing. And if you don't have an idea, then you can be the audience for people who have some ideas. And then you might get ideas from their ideas. So that's how it all works. So anyway, so Greg, you wanted to...
Yeah, just a couple comments to kind of pull different pieces together from folks that have talked tonight. I think for me a basic principle is, as a sociologist and as somebody who does visual media, things are often not what they seem to be. And in sociology, that's a big one. Things are not as they seem. Like there are all these different, you know, practices and patterns and institutions that form an invisible kind of tissue into which we're all connected, right? And that's why we can sit like this and it doesn't seem weird, and you all look at me when I'm talking, and that's just sort of expected. These are all very much conditioned, largely unquestioned practices. So I think that's always good. And like when I look at, you know, Ron's going back to Insecurity, the film that he did on the barbed wire, you know, it's like things are more than they seem. This everyday, taken for granted object has a life, a political, a cultural, and economic life behind it. And there's a story there about human collective behavior that can be told. And I mean, that's true for the color blue. That's true for this technology that we're using to stream the content of what's happening here to people who are not here. Like there's a story there. And so, you know, things are often more than they seem. And I think problematizing the taken for granted, things that we just see every single day, is a good starting point for pitching an idea. Mm-hmm. You know, there's a guy in my neighborhood who sells chupas, which is it's a Mexican / Puerto Rican ice cream sort of concoction. And he just walks up and down the street every day saying, "Chupa!" That's how he does it. And it's amazing and it's beautiful. And I really want to find out how he developed that particular way of, you know, intoning and speaking, and you know, that's how everybody knows him. The little kids come running out, you know. But how did he get to that point where he knew exactly how he should issue that word, chupas, in order to maximize his business? So there's a story there. Mm-hmm. It's just something that happens every day on my block in Chicago. Mm-hmm. But I think that every story has two things: aspiration and change. Somebody's trying to make money, somebody's trying to stay alive, somebody's trying to die, somebody's trying to be funny, somebody's trying to make money, somebody's trying to not need money. And that somebody's, you know, and this applies to all forms, in video games and photography, all visual media. I think there's always aspiration. Sometimes it's your own aspiration as the maker of this, right? As in first person sort of documentaries. The other thing is that change is manifest either because it occurs or because it does not occur. But change is on the horizon. It's palpably present. And it may not happen, and that may be the point of the story, is that things are just going to continue to be the same. But nevertheless, that becomes the point of the story. And I want to say about Ron's film, you know, Hard Time, I said what I said about, somewhat pejoratively, about films that are just talking heads, which is not that film. It's not just talking heads. And even if it was just a talking head film, there's a lot to be said for making a talking head film about somebody who was in solitary confinement for 29 years and not able to talk to anybody. So that in itself is a powerful moment. Like when he is on camera and he is getting time and space is being held for him. That is a big part of that film's story for me, just that he's present and that Ron's present for him. And the last thing I'll say to sort of bring it all to try to tie a few things together and to get us to the next point is about like pitching that story. So 3 quick examples. One, I wanted to make a film about drugs in New Orleans. And so what I pitched to National Geographic was, I want to do a film about how the drug markets for cocaine got rebuilt after Katrina. Because nobody thinks about that. It's like, oh, rebuilding the tourism and the infrastructure and housing, all that stuff. But it's like, okay, so this is something that's sort of below the surface, but it's always there because there's a ton of cocaine in every city. And that was my pitch. The film that we're going to see tonight, I was like, I'm going to make a film, 72 hours in a heroin den. And it's like, boom, here's the money. Because they have a certain idea, and now it ends up being a film about domestic life in an urban area. It's for me. But like what my story is and what I'm pitching them might be something slightly different. The pitch is always going to sound much sexier than what I know the story to be. The last one is an example, and that's a piece that I did called Empty Spaces. If you've ever lost someone, you know that grief is particularly salient when you come across spaces that they used to occupy and now they're dead, so they can't occupy those spaces. And at first I thought I was going to do photography, so I started photographing spaces that were previously occupied by now dead people, people who had died prematurely of a drug overdose. And I was looking at all these photographs, and I'd worked with all these families who had lost their children, usually adolescent or young adult children, to a drug overdose. And they were fully supportive of the project, welcomed me into their homes. I spent days with many of them. The photographs just fell flat. They didn't work. I was like, why? There's not anything there. They're just so moribund. They're just so dead. And so then I thought, I think what I need is a timeline. I need these images to roll by on a timeline. What I need is video, which seemed like a really weird thing. Why would you ever film, like make a motion picture about a stationary object? And it wasn't even an object. It's a still decorated bedroom of a 16-year-old girl who died of an overdose. Or the empty seat at a dining room table during family dinner. Nothing's happening there. And so it doesn't seem to demand a filmic treatment, right? Photography would make sense. It's static. But there was something about letting that camera roll for 3 minutes on that still decorated bedroom with the refrigerator humming in the background and nothing happening except dust particles in the air that did everything for that story. So you never know what's going to happen. You never know where the story's going to be necessarily, but if you keep at it, maybe you'll figure it out.
All right.
I'll add one more thing.
Okay.
Being an artist, I have done it myself a lot of times, self-censoring, thinking that this idea is not good. So initially, whatever ideas comes to you, just don't censor it. Don't say that it's not a good idea. It's not a good idea. Keep working on it, and then think about it more, and it will start making sense, whether it's a good idea or not a good idea over time. But don't censor yourself.
And the other thing is, you have to build up your ability to take rejection. Mm-hmm. Like you have to. It's like being a performer. So you've got to like work yourself up that you're going to perform, and sometimes you're just going to fall flat. But you learn from every single performance. You learn what things engage people, what things caught their eye, and the more you can sort of talk about it and try not to bore people. But also, I mean, because my first film where I decided I'm going to make a real film, I'm going to do everything I can, and I worked so hard on that, and finally I found somebody who liked the idea, and then I got like sort of like a half acceptance of that with the National Film Board. And it was this film about women who built airplanes in the Second World War, and then one of the chief aeronautical engineer was a woman. She was Canada's first woman engineer. She was also a polio victim, and she ran a giant factory that made hurricanes. And built helldivers for the Americans, and then all these women, thousands and thousands of women who were like welders and did everything, and these women were still around. They were like such cool women. But when I started trying to get some money and support so that I could make this film, I had to like finally put it down in a story form and write it. And I was rejected, my story, so many times that two of my most important characters in the film, they died. They were elderly women. So the woman who was like the welder for the whole place, by the time that, you know, people were saying, oh, you know, like, oh, well, you know, Elsa McGill, she's dead, so you don't have enough material on her. And can't you get these letters? And, you know, wasn't she, you know, like, there was just like, it was never enough for people to make it sexy enough. And they said, oh, this is a very quaint local history. Nobody would care about it across Canada. It would be fun for people in Thunder Bay to know this story, I guess, but not a national story. Anyways, that it turned out to be completely the opposite. They're still showing it on TV, and nobody's made films really about women during the Second World War. Hardly any. This was like the only one, really. And so, but it was totally, you know, I had to shed so many tears and face so much rejection. And but this is the best one. Was I sent it into the, because I'd moved to Thunder Bay, and I used to work for the Film Board of Manitoba, and they said, no, now you have to go to Toronto. So I sent it to Toronto, and I had, you know, worked on films and that, and they said, oh, Kelly, you know, we'd love to work with you someday, and yeah, this will be great, but we've already done a story on women in the war. And I said, you made one film about women in the First World War. Like, and it's not this story, and it's not a factory. Would you say that about men? Well, we covered the First World War, so we made a film about men in the First World War. We don't have to cover the Second World War, you know, like, anyways, but that is what you will get from, you know, when you're asking for money or support, and you're going to hear it over and over again. So you really, you know, the first people that are your most supportive are your friends and family, and, you know, practice pitching with them, and then if you're going to make a film, like here we're going to make some films that are going to be short, or a video, or an animation. It's going to be very short, quick. We're going to try to get something done. But when you want to make that piece, that product that's you're going to pour the next little while into it, maybe years, you better really care passionately about that story. Because if you go the other way and you try to do the story that's sexy, that's going to sell, but you don't care about it, you know, after like 2-3 years, it's just painful and no fun. So anyways, so let's have a break.
Well, I was going to say one short thing, and that is you appreciate sort of where I come from. So I'm an academic. I write articles and publish books, and a handful of people worldwide read those articles and books. They sit in libraries, and they're sort of waiting for somebody to walk by and take it off the shelf and say, this is interesting and this is fascinating, and see all the things that I poured into it that I think are interesting and fascinating. So when I approach film, I'm not thinking of an Oscar nomination or anything like that. I'm thinking of producing something that I think needs to be produced, that tells a story that I think needs to be told. It's not that I don't care if nobody ever sees it, but I'm not hungry for large audiences. All of my work, or our work, is online for free. I don't know who watches it, and the reward comes when people contact you about something you've long since forgotten about and say, you know, I stumbled onto this, and that's really good, and, you know, but we'd like to see it or show it or something like that. And you think, that's right, you know, it does have a life. Even though I've forgotten about it, you know, it's a wayward child that's gone away, doesn't write, doesn't phone. It's still out there doing whatever it's doing, and it lasts a long, long, long time. And I think that's what you have to look for, right? It's not necessarily immediate gratification, and it's certainly not income that you can expect. You might get lucky, but for the most part, you're making the film for yourself, for your own reasons, and for those people that you think could benefit from it. Excuse me. And that's what I have to say before the break.
One last piece. It's going to be very short. So being an artist, as like for me, the process is more important, and the end product is just just a byproduct of the process. So just enjoy the process.
Well, that feeds into the whole thing. If you're going to do something that you're not going to be passionate or like or be interested in, then it's just going to become work. And like, who needs work?
So just as a maybe segue into the break, what are some crazy ideas that we should keep alive for more than 30 seconds? Because I think that's really great advice. Keep an idea alive, let it have its own lifespan. And yeah, just sort of like things that we may feel somewhat passionate about or deeply curious. And I'll just throw one out. As Riaz was saying what he was saying, I was like, armpits. Like, why has nobody ever done a documentary on armpits? Like, it's a strange part of the body. It's not one that we often show off, and there's a lot of political stuff going on with armpits and gender.
One done by my friend.
Really? There's an armpit documentary?
Yes.
Okay.
Not documentary.
Oh.
She made a piece, but it's about her armpit, and she has a...
Like photography or something? I could see, yeah.
It's an art piece, but it's a very interesting one.
Okay, cool.
It's all about...
all right, well, that's my idea. So let's just maybe like throw out, what are some other things we could do? Crazy things that come to mind you're just interested in.
I saw an article today about the fetishism of armpits. So there are people that like to sniff armpits.
Okay, see?
Maybe we know someone.
There's
Maybe we can
Well,
look
there's a whole article about famous.
This is a creative process, of course.
Yeah.
But there's movie stars now who they're rocking their armpit hair. Women movie stars. That's a whole other. That's a whole new.
I mean, gender politics. That's a whole angle on that. Like you can go so many directions. You can do photos. You can do a video game. Right, a video game about armpits. That could be amazing. But what are some ideas you have, just to get us like warmed up for pitches?
Yeah.
I feel like we're
Who's
all
got ideas
in
here?
armpits now.
We're all in armpits. Like, what's
That's a good
another
idea.
thing? Like, what pops into your head? Like, what's some crazy thing that we could
I
explore?
would go for really zoomed in photography.
Okay.
So it looks like it's a landscape or something.
All right, see, that's
abstract.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. But other subject areas, other content ideas.
I kind of find it funny how people like have accidents with their cell phones. Like even when I'm driving by, I can see someone going and then they smash into a pole or something like that. You're like, what the hell? Or they're biking or they trip. Like it's just amazing. Walking into a post. Yeah.
Yeah, walk into a post. Yeah, and then
21st
right,
century
okay.
danger.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, that's a good one. What other things?
She came up with it, but squeezing the zits on YouTube. Yeah, YouTube. I was watching his thing.
Yep.
I'm like, oh, gross, what is that? But I had to click on it. I was like, but I mean, I had to look at it for some reason.
Right. Which there's probably a bigger story there than just popping zits. Right, that's maybe an example, right? That could be tied to a, sort of a general human.
Well, I guess morbid curiosity in general.
Morbid curiosity, yeah.
Well, I'm really happy that we have like such a good age range and here, because YouTube. I just went to this conference and there was. Anyways, YouTube is the largest broadcaster in the world. And 50% of all video, all screens are consumed on your cell phone. So that means that most people are watching stuff on their cell phone. And I just noticed on my Vimeo channel, I looked at the stats, which I don't often do, but they have a new kind of stat, and it's like how many cell phone views my video had compared to how many desktop views, which is pretty interesting. So, like this is, and, I know some of you here, I won't name names, but, watch a lot of YouTube videos on all different kind of topics that, like I would never even have imagined that I would watch that. So you guys probably have like way more ideas of cool things that you could.
Nathan is chomping at the bit.
Or we're used to scratching.
I got an idea. It's a historical one. I want to know, in the 1920s, I'd like to do a documentary on how wrestlers used to hustle the locals. So everybody's farming, they're out there, there's land changing hand and everything like that. But these guys are out there and they're kind of conning the locals in all sorts of different ways. And how do they do that? How do you live with yourself? You know, these guys raise families and everything like that. And they were fixing matches when people thought it was legitimate, and they were making a lot of money. Then they go on to the next town. It's never been done. So.
You mean that wrestling is fixed?
Even back sometimes back then it was, sometimes it wasn't. People used to gamble on it, right?
So we should take that break.
Okay, yeah, so let's have a break, and everybody, like, don't talk to somebody you know. Talk to somebody that you just are meeting for the first time, and pitch your ideas and listen to their ideas.
And for our viewers, we'll be back in.
And there's, and let's say at 8 o'clock, it's 7:45.
Yeah, and then you'll hear from them too.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
yeah, and so you, so.
They hear you.
Oh, yeah, okay. So, and yeah, so you guys and Sue look out also. We want to hear your ideas.
And you'll put them on big screen.
And remember,
we'll put you on the big
armpits
screen.
have already been suggested.
Yeah, but there's
so many
ways
angles.
out.
There's so many angles.
Perhaps in
100
silica they're
movies.
different.
Yeah, we can stop.